Now, have you ever asked yourself the question, why am I so inconsistent? You know what I mean? It's like you can do something really well in one area of your life, and then it all falls apart in another area of your life. For example, when you're at work, you're on it like a focused superstar. There's no sign of procrastination, everything's organized, you get things done. And you come home and then, oh my God, you don't get this task done. It's all chaotic. You're disorganized. I mean, what gives there? Well, we're going to scratch that itch and answer that why. And the answer may well surprise you. Plus, there'll be some gems on what you can do with this new information in a way that massively improves your life. Sound good? Stay tuned and hit it, Kim.
Welcome to the Be a Brilliant Human podcast. You're in the right place if you're a growth-seeking being who acknowledges the challenges and delights of your humanity on the path to an ever more conscious life. If you want to feel inspired to love and accept yourself, to feel free to be and express you in all your brilliance, if you want to truly value yourself and others and feel energized and alive both at home and in the world, then sit back and take a breath as you explore and grow the brilliance of your beautiful human self with your host, the father of non-personal awareness and creator of the MPA process, Joel Young.
Hello, and welcome to the Be a Brilliant Human podcast with me, Joel Young. And we are at episode number 55. So if you'd like to see the show notes, then you can go to www.beabrillianthuman.com/55. In fact, you can go through our entire back catalogue, picking out a number, less than 55 at this point, or maybe more if you're listening later, and find the show notes to each episode. It's just beabrillianthuman.com/ then the number of the episode, and you will find it. And today we are going to be looking at why am I inconsistent? How fun is that? By the way, if you're brand new here, welcome. I'm really glad you're here, and welcome back. If you're someone who listens on a regular basis, I absolutely adore the fact that you make a decision somewhere in you to have me in your ear pods or on the I was going to say radio. Showing my age, aren't I? Well, wherever you listen to me, in the car, whatever, I'm delighted that you come back for more. And if you haven't already subscribed, do hit that subscribe button. You'll be notified when all of the episodes come out. And I want to say a big thank you because I've had a lot of feedback I've just completed a 5-part series about what blocks you from getting the shifts that you long for. And I've had a lot of feedback for that. It seems that that's really hit a nerve. It's entertained you. In fact, quite a few people have mentioned that they're loving my humor, which is a good thing because I just can't rinse it out of me. I think being a brilliant human, not taking it too seriously is part of the deal. I mean, obviously there's times you've got to be really connected, empathetic, all that stuff. I hope you realize that that's part of it. But come on, isn't it ridiculous, this human experience? It's wonderfully, deliciously ridiculous. If you can laugh at it, there's a way that laughter, that humor just allows a lot of that heavy stuff to kind of be shaken off. Also, if you want to reach out to me, please go ahead and do that. There's lots of ways to do that. You can do it via social media. My handle is at Joel Young MPA on things like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And if you're a YouTuber, you can find me Joel Young. I say that every time. I don't know how to sort my brain out there. You can get me on YouTube at youtube.com. I'm so arrogant to think that YouTube is under my name. youtube.com/Joel Young. It's that simple. And come find me. And of course, on Facebook, there's the Facebook page, which is MPA Rocks for MPA in general. And also, I've got the new Be a Brilliant Human Facebook page as well. And speaking of MPA, especially if you're new, MPA stands for non-personal awareness, and it's a simple way to stop taking things personally and so much more. In fact, if you're some kind of therapist or coach, it is a technique that if you practice it will also thread itself through the rest of all those wonderful tools you use. But more than anything else, it will teach you what I like to call the agendaless way, which means there's a chance that you could have no more resistant clients. How fabulous is that? If that intrigues you, make sure you look out for the advanced training, which will be coming out soon and later this year, because this is going out 2020, this very weird year that we're in. And certainly early next year, we'll be doing our first practitioner training, so I'm very excited about that. And someone who reached out to me this week, I'm not going to say her name, she didn't give me permission, but someone contacted me via Instagram private message, and it was a beautiful message, and obviously she's enjoying the podcast and has found MPA and is getting on great with that. But she raised the issue of body issues, overeating and overweightness, and just general issues around eating. And so that's something that I'm definitely going to be doing a podcast episode on very soon. So if you have any issues around that, any questions, now's a great time to reach out to me and ask those questions. So if I can possibly bring that into the show, when I do that show, it would be great to have your examples. Have you had any experiences of what you did to overcome that? Are there particular places where you feel stuck in that arena, if that's an issue for you? Or do you know somebody who has those issues and it's you find it tricky or easy to deal with them or to talk about it with them? Whatever the issues are around weight or eating disorders, body dysmorphia, all of those kind of things. It's a big topic, and I'm not sure which angle I'm going to take, but it's definitely clearly something that, because someone's reached out to me, then it's something I want to talk to in this podcast. And that's true. If there's any other issues that you have or situations that you want clarification on, or anything really that you think, oh, it'd be really nice if Joel did a podcast on that, that's the way to do it. Reach out to me. Oh, I didn't even mention that on the website, which is www.beabrillianthuman.com, there'll be a button there. There is a button there that says leave me a message, and you can leave a voice message and let me know on that message if you'd like me to include it in the show, because I can do that. If you'd like to have to appear on the show in that form, asking a question, that would be great too. Or just leave a message just so that you can say to me, hey Joel, can you do this for me? That's the way to do it, which of course is also available on things like private messenger on Facebook, Instagram, and all those other wonderful places. So I've called today's episode, Why Am I Inconsistent? Because that was a question I was literally asked today, and it's a question I get asked a lot, and there's a really interesting answer to it. So let's get into it. So what do I mean by inconsistency? I guess there's lots of different forms of that when I think about it. The context really where I get asked that question is usually, again, in the realm of personal development or personal growth, where someone feels like they've done work on themselves and they've, in quotes, healed something in a particular area of their life, and then something else comes up and they find that it happens again over there. And it's like, why can I do it here and I can't do it there? The example I gave at the top of the program was, about being, super efficient at work and then procrastinating like heck at home, because there are different contexts that are happening and we seem to behave differently. What's going on there? Today's example, I was chatting to someone who's an owner of Boundary Bootcamp, and, we were chatting about a situation that she was experiencing, and her question really was around the idea of internal boundaries, because she's someone who has extremely strong boundaries in a lot of areas of her life, and yet in a relational setting she's found that she's had very poor boundaries, and it was like doing her head in. It's like, but I know myself here, I know what's going on, and I know how to say, I don't have a problem saying no. Saying no isn't my problem at all. And yet finding that in these other situations that there was this, it was not the case. She couldn't figure out what was going on, which got us into the conversation that we're about to have and made me think, this is something I hear a lot. Maybe I should share this on the podcast as I record it today. So that's what we're doing. So where does it come from? What's the reason? Well, I've got a question for you. How many personalities do you have? What? Yeah, you're right. How many personalities do you have? We think of a personality as being, this is my personality, I've got one. But when you think about it, we've all kind of got multiple personalities. I'm not talking about multiple personality disorder in the clinical sense of it. although it's very interesting when you look at that. But we do have multiple personalities. We've got all these different contextual beingnesses that are happening in our lives, and in different contexts, different personalities are more active within us. I'm going to give you a moment just to let that in. How many personalities do you have? The answer is multiple personalities. Now, it's really, really fascinating to me. I heard once, and I haven't had the time, and really can't be asked, if I'm honest, to look up the actual research, but I did look it up once, so it's out there somewhere. They did some amazing research on multiple personality disorder. This is the actual clinical stuff, which is, in a way, just the volume turned up on our natural nature anyway. But in multiple personality disorder, what happens is they go fully and completely into an entire personality. And what they found when they studied this to a large degree is that there can literally be physiological changes as well as psychological changes. There's certainly behavioral changes. The whole character, facial changes can come about when people switch personalities. To the degree, and get this, this is documented, there are many cases they've got where people with multiple personalities will have a disease like they can't walk in one personality, but they can in another. Even where they've shown that you can diagnostically show that they have cancer in one personality, but when they switch to another one, miraculously it goes away. Now, one of the contexts when I was looking up this research several years ago was to look at the really powerful and fluid nature of our bodies in terms of how they respond to our psychology. And our bodies, in terms of, disease and illness, are much more capable of swift changes than we dared hope in many ways. It's only really our general psychology that stops that from being the case. But that's where we are in humanity right now. But it fascinated me when I looked at that, the degree to which everything changes according to the personality that's operating. Now, the word that I generally use with personalities is identity, because each of your personalities is kind of like an identity. And if you think about that word identity, it breaks down to id and entity. Id is quite a Freudian thing. It's to do with the core instinctual self, and entity is like a being. So I do think that we're alive with many people inside of us. I mean, it's not outside of the realms of thinking, really. It kind of gets scary because it's got that multiple personality madness thing going on. But really, we're communities. We're not single entities at all. If you think about it, we're a community of cells. All of our cells have consciousness, and there's trillions and trillions of them. Then never mind the sort of the entire many nations of bacteria that are all alive with their own consciousness inside our bodies. The convenience of treating ourselves as a single entity, I mean, it's really useful, but it's not very true. So we have these identities, and which personality is active is dependent upon the context. That's why you can be superfly organized at work, because you're in work mode, right? You're who you are at work. Now, who you are is that identity, that personality. But when you are who you are, the who you are being, what that does, really fascinatingly, is who you are is what controls the beliefs, the emotions, and the behaviors that are active in you at that time. So often we'll do a lot of work on beliefs, but if you're not changing who you're being, then, the beingness of you can be very creative. I can adjust some beliefs, but still be who I am, says that part of you. And then when you go home, you're being, whether it's mum or dad, or maybe you're being slob dad. You're Superfly's executive, then you're being slob dad at home. That's who you're being. And so the way that all of the psychology operates, again, your beliefs, your emotions, and your behaviors are more as a consequence of who you are being. So then you can't get access to that organized self, because in that context, you're being someone else. So the answer to why am I inconsistent is often more about, or the question you might want to ask if you want to look at it is, who am I being? Who am I being in different contexts? And then you can begin to actually do something about it. And I guess it's important to say that, having just said you can do something about it, that one of the things that happens with the whole idea of why am I inconsistent, it may be that it's okay. What if it's okay to be inconsistent? Because sometimes, we are different people in different contexts. One of my favorite quotes of all time was from Gandhi. And Gandhi said, and I love this, "I've given up the need to be consistent." I mean, that guy knew this stuff, right? I kind of took that on board because I found that one of the things that was an issue for me for a long time was my issue with myself around consistency. But the thing is, it was like butting against my natural fluid self because I was trying to be something, how can I say this? Something I wasn't in a place. No, I'm having a hard time saying this. How do I say it? Okay, if I was one thing somewhere, I felt I needed to be that everywhere. And that became a situation where the medicine of sort of self-improvement became the poison. And when I relaxed and gave up the need to be consistent, one of the things that happened is I got to just relax and notice who I was being. And then in the beingness, in any context, within that being, you can look at, where I can polish that personality or improve it or wrangle out the bugs that are causing me stress or not nice for other people. Within the context there, you can change it. So it's worth looking at this in terms of really the context is this personality working in this context? And sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't, and then you can get to look at it. But it can be very relaxing, or at least self-forgiving, to realize that inconsistency and multiple personalities is the way we are built naturally anyway. All right, so the question comes, so how do I look at this? What do I do with it if there is a situation where that inconsistency is causing me suffering or pain? So when a personality is operating in a particular context of your life that is causing you suffering, it usually means that that particular personality that's got the reins is unhealthy or needs work or is just, not a good fit for that context. And usually that happens because we've set that up when we were young with certain survival strategies, and it's still operating in our world today. So in those cases, that the job really is either to transform that personality or to let it go, and also to look at what would be a more healthy expression or more healthy identity or personality in that situation. So normally that's about working with different energies or different personalities to such a degree that you find a tipping point where your entire system understands and gets that how you're operating in that context or who you're being in that context right now is not the best way to go about it. And you can get it cognitively, but that's normally not enough because that personality is going to be, again, very clever and cluey and know be on to you, dodging the bullets left, right, and center. But that's kind of the job is to sort of work to shift the energy into something which is more healthy. Now, there's different ways you can go about it. I'm a great fan of using different approaches, probably because of my general personality type. I like to work energetically, but I also have a very questioning mind. I have an active mind. In a downside, I tend to overthink things or get into analysis of things. On the upside, it gives me a lot of creative intelligence. But I find that it's really good when I can use both sides of that part of me. So I can work energetically, and we'll talk about MPA with that. And then I can work practically, which is more where I talk often about making things a practice or looking at the cognitive mechanics of things and making a practice out of the shift in that way. Those two things hand in hand is your best way to go. So the first one is MPA. So MPA, interestingly, I didn't realize this when it first popped out of me back in, 2007. An MPA, again, as I said at the top of the program, is a simple way to stop taking things personally. You can download it. Make sure you go and download it if you haven't already. You can go to joelyoungmpa.com and get hold of the simple process sheet for free there. But it actually works with identity. What you do with the MPA process is you find a keyword, phrase, or what I call a cookie cutter, and you put it into the blank space within 5 of those 6 lines, right? And then you say the words out loud, and it's very, very simple. But what you're actually identifying is some of the subtle identities that are at play. So as you use MPA, and one of the questions I get is, how can the 6 little lines do these amazing things that it does? It's because when you really get what I call an animated cookie cutter, which is one which is really clicking, is really alive in the moment, and you use the MPA to shift it, then you're shifting at an identity level. And of course, then, as we learned from multiple personality disorder, all of your beliefs, emotions, and behaviors shift all by themselves. So the MPA, this little MPA thing, does a lot of the heavy lifting, and where before you may have had to go through trawling through your history, your trauma, your, working out the belief systems, all the rest of it, just shifting that identity means that everything else down the line changes by itself, because ultimately what I'm saying there is MPA helps you to change who you're being in a different context, exactly what we're talking about today. And also, an MPA, when it's done really in a really refined way, if you decide to come and do the training, if you go through the basic training, then the advanced training, even if you come to practitioners, more and more you're going to refine how you can literally get out of the way. So the subtlety and the sometimes very illogical cookie cutters, the keywords that you use, become very powerful in terms of shifting identity. But one of the things about MPA, for especially people, if you've just started using, you might go, this makes no sense at all. It is kind of a logical bypass, or it doesn't make sense always that the words that you're using or saying should have such an impact. And one of the ways, that we get in our own way with MPA is because of our logical mind going, that doesn't make sense. And the episode I did on spiritual dogma as part of the series of 5 is one which speaks to that, where the spiritual dogma or the personal development or psychoanalytical dogma butts up against the crazy magic, wonderful magic of MPA. So I see that as something which is a block at times to people, hence the training to help you to get over that stuff and just let the magic happen. So MPA is a really fantastic way to work energetically with the identities that are stuck or causing you suffering in your world. So the other side is the cognitive side. And this is interesting because, and I'll give you a personal example of mine, because sometimes when you understand what is the context where this difficult or challenging or unhelpful or suffering creating personality is operating, what is the context? Because normally it's like that there's a time or a context where it knows to activate. It gets to have control in a certain situation. I mean, one way you can find that out is to ask yourself, how do I know when to activate this personality? Who am I being in this situation that's rubbish? Okay, that's who I'm being. How do I know when? Well, when this happens or when that happens. When you get that piece of the equation, then it goes from being something which is a pain in the arse to something which is actually a signal. Now that is a massive switcheroo. That's a massive turnaround. So a good example that I have for that is actually procrastination. So I used to fight procrastination. You try to will it away. I'm going to do this. And all the time I was fighting it was just feeding into the polarization, the charge, and the power of that part of my personality. And since I've looked at it, how does it know when to operate? I discovered it knows when to go into procrastination when there's something that I don't really know how to do. And it becomes overwhelming. So now if I get the slightest hint of procrastination, I now have a cognitive path to follow. I go, oh, it's a signal. That means that there's something here that I don't know how to do, and I'm afraid. The procrastination is the old strategy. So what's my new strategy? I've learned I need to chunk it down, which means I need to break it into tiny chunks so that I can just do one. Just do a little one. A tiny little small step is enough to break the procrastination pattern. So in the beginning, of course, I was using MPA to shift the energy, but I also made a practice of turning the behavior or the triggered behavior into a signal, and then giving myself a cognitive path to know what I could do with my mind to say, it's a signal. That means I need to do this. And it would just help me step through it so my mind could feel comfortable as well, while the foundations shifted with the MPA. So there's a few parts in there just to break that down for you in case you didn't catch it. So the first part is to, on the cognitive side, is to identify, what's the context where this personality kicks off? Who am I being there? Who am I being, and where and when does it happen? So that might take a little bit of inquiry. You can journal it out. You can sit with the question, whatever mechanism you use for that. In MPA, we'll just use a spew. When you download the sheet, you'll understand what that is. So yeah, who am I being and where does it show up? Then you convert that behavior to a signal. Right, that's a signal that I'm about to activate this personality. And then you just need to ponder and contemplate, when you discover what's really happening. Like for me, I was just scared of some unknown. What is a practical way you can address that? What could you do differently? And in a way, this works from the other side because you activate a different being state. A great question to ask there, of course, is, who would I like to be here? Or who could I be that would feel better? And just feel around inside and activate the beingness state that would be more powerful in that position. You can rehearse it in your mind. You can take yourself forward to a situation and say, well, if I was being this here, so for my procrastination example, if I was someone who wasn't afraid and just had everything chunked down and did small steps, if that was who I was, if I was being the chunked down proactive person, well, I'd just feel great. I'd get a lot more stuff done. And since I've been doing that, of course, that's the case. I get a lot more stuff done now than I used to. And oh God, once I started the procrastination cycle, it just get worse and worse and worse and more scary. But I've learned that about myself. So in shifting it in terms of how I relate to it now, because I was asked this question today when we had this discussion, so is it completely gone? Well, no, not really. It's not like it doesn't go. When you realize that it's a signal rather than a problem, it's not about getting rid of it anymore. It's about, dealing with it with what it is. It just tells me, that means there's something I don't know and I'm a bit scared. So that's okay. I now know how to deal with that. So I found that of course, that process, when you practice anything, it becomes more automatic. You go into that unconscious competence phase where, you just do it. Like when you're driving, in the beginning, it's more difficult to learn all the bits and pieces. Once you've done it quite a bit, you can chat away, and just drive, or you don't even realize who was driving me half this way. I was just singing along to the radio. So it's the same process. Any practice has that great benefit. So your two ways to deal with it are MPA, well, any other route, but I'm gonna plumb for MPA because it really is the best. It works great with identity. And then if you've got that kind of busy mind that needs some kind of scaffolding to get it through, then try some of that cognitive approach, which is more about identifying who you're being, who you want to be, what's the context where it shows up, what's the behavior. That's a signal. If it's a signal, what's it a signal to do? Don't go into that pattern. Do something better. And just a little bit of investigation will help you to find out what that is. All right. Well, I hope this has given you some inner peace in relation to your inconsistency and where any inconsistency in you is causing you a problem. It's given you a route of investigation to get you out of there. And of course, again, if you haven't already downloaded the free MPA sheet, then go ahead and do that. You can do it at joelyoungmpa.com. Plus, it will be on the show notes, which you'll find for today at www.babrillianthuman.com/55. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already. And if you've enjoyed this show, if you like this show, if you think it's got value in it that you can share with somebody else, go and tell them. There's nothing better than actually telling someone there's this great show. Get them to pull out their podcast platform and search for it, or go to the website, which you now have. So I hope you've enjoyed this show. Do let me know. Again, just to remind you, if you've got anything that you'd like to sort of include or ask or have answered as part of a show about eating disorders or overweightness, eating issues in general, then get in touch. Let me know. I'd love to hear your questions or your input. That'd be great to have kind of a community aspect to that show. Otherwise, have a fantastic week. I will see you next time, and all that remains is to cue the moo.